Well, good afternoon, Michiganders. It is Tuesday, December 15th, and this is Tuesday with Tom, Michigan's only weekly internet show where we do answer your questions about estate planning and estate settlement in Michigan. As always, I'm your host, Tom Doyle, estate planning attorney, lifelong Michigan resident, and ambassador for all things good in this great state of Michigan. Welcome to today's program. Before we get started, a brief shout out to my sister Nora. Happy birthday, Nora. I hope that you have an awesome celebration of your birthday today in Colorado. Perhaps you're out on the ski slopes already, but I hope the day is terrific for you. Last week's episode, what your estate plan must include. Not what your estate plan should include, what your estate plan must include. And it was an archived episode, a previous program that I had played again, in which I discussed what your estate plan must include. So if you're putting together your estate plan, maybe year-end planning, or you're looking at making New Year's resolutions, I encourage you listen to last week's episode to make sure that your plan isn't missing something. Today's show, well, it's the time of giving. It's that charitable Christmas spirit that we are in now. Perhaps that's what you're looking at, or you're looking at doing year-end tax planning. So the question I want to discuss today is, should I make a gift to my church's endowment fund? But please remember, what I'm about to discuss during the program is, as always, for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice or tax planning advice or financial advice. You need to work with your attorney or your tax planner or your financial advisor to determine what is appropriate for you. Should I make a gift to my church's endowment fund? I'm sitting here, I'm a member of a church. Perhaps my church has a school. I'm doing some year-end planning. I'm in the spirit of giving. And I know, obviously, that my church or the school can use the funds that I might provide to them. Maybe I'm going to make a current gift. Maybe I'm going to make a distribution as part of my estate plan, but I'm looking at my church's endowment fund and considering contributing into it. And so, things to ask yourself when you're looking at making that gift to your school's endowment fund that are important, that I think you should have answers to before you're making your contribution, or before you're including that church or your school's endowment fund in your estate plan. And one question, a basic question, is, who owns the fund? Who owns it? Is it your church that owns it? Perhaps if you are a church within a diocese, is it the diocese that owns it? Is the school that owns it? Who actually owns the fund? And I don't think it's inappropriate for you to ask for documentation showing that you're about to be making a contribution. I think it's important for you to know and understand who owns the fund that you are contributing to. Why? Well, perhaps, second question that fits in with who owns the funds is, what limitations are there on what the fund can be used for? If the fund is owned by your church and you're making the contribution to your school, the question, can the school fund be used for other church purposes? There was a church here in mid-Michigan that ended up being a concern by some members of the church when somebody had made a sizable contribution to the school, only to find out later on that the church transferred funds from that school fund for other church purposes. Well, that clearly was not what was intended by the individual who made the contribution to the school. If the fund is owned actually by the diocese and not by your church, then it's appropriate to know, is it possible that the diocese can use the fund for other purposes? And so that fits in with the question about who owns the fund. What limitations are there on what the fund can be used for? It seems to me that if you're making a contribution to your school fund, you should be assured that the money can only be used for the school. If you're making a contribution to your church's fund, you should be assured that the fund can only be used for the church. And another question that is so important today, and it's because of what's going on in the Catholic Church, is the fund exposed to risk? Is it exposed to claims that might be brought against the parish? Is it exposed to claims that might be made against the diocese? If you're going to contribute some significant dollars to your church's fund or your school's fund, only to find out later on that those funds are now going to be used to pay off claims against the parish or claims against the diocese, you need to know that when you are making the contribution or considering including the contribution as part of your estate plan. Again, who owns the fund? What limitations are there on what the fund can be used for, if any? And what risk is the fund exposed to? And when you look at that, you might decide, do I have an alternative? I know my church has a fund, my school has a fund, the diocese has a fund, but do I have an alternative if I'm not satisfied with the answers that I receive to the foregoing questions? Well, that's where you might consider creating an endowment fund at your local community foundation. For example, here in mid-Michigan, you would have the Capital Regional Community Foundation, and you can go to your local foundation and find out what does it take to create my own endowment fund. Or you might be surprised to find out that there's already an endowment fund created at your community foundation for the benefit of your school or for the benefit of your church. Why would you consider the regional foundation as an alternative? Well, again, go back to those questions that I asked before. If you have a foundation or a fund, an endowment fund at your community foundation, it's not owned by your church. It's not owned by your school. It's not owned by your diocese. Therefore, it's not subject to claims that would be made against your church or diocese. So if you have an endowment fund set up for your school or your church, which you might create yourself, you might be surprised to find out it doesn't usually take very much to create an endowment fund that would accomplish your goals. But again, if it's at the community foundation, it's not going to be subject to claims against your church or diocese. Importantly, it can't be used by your church or diocese for other purposes. So if you have an endowment fund for your school, your parish can't use that money for something else. If you have an endowment fund for your church, your diocese can't use that money for something else. So when you look at those questions, who owns the funds, what limitations are on what the fund can be used for, and is the fund exposed to risk? If you're not satisfied with those answers, take a look at your community foundation. I was working with clients just recently, and in meeting with them, we had a discussion. What did they want to do? And they wanted to include their children's Catholic school as part and parcel of their estate plan. They were going to contribute significant dollars. But when they looked at who was going to own the existing fund, or who owned the existing fund that they were considering giving to, and they looked at the possibility that those funds could be used for other purposes in the school, and they looked at the possibility that their funds that they were about to contribute would be exposed to claims against the parish or claims against the diocese, they decided that going to their local community foundation and creating their own endowment fund was an appropriate solution for them, so that they could be assured that the money would be limited to being used for their children's school. So again, it's that time of giving. I'm not saying don't make gifts to our churches, and I'm not saying never make gifts to your church endowment fund or your school endowment fund, but you need to ask yourself some questions, or ask the fund, not you. You need to have some questions answered as part of your evaluation, just like anything else, just like any other investment that you might consider making, because in truly making a contribution, whether it's now or at a later date, into an endowment fund at your church or at your school, at your diocese, it's an investment in the future. It's an investment in the future, and it's appropriate for you to know how secure is your investment in that future, and are the funds going to be used for what you intended. Well, that's it for today's program, but as always, just a reminder that Amanda and I would be honored to have the opportunity to help you protect your loved ones by either putting together your estate plan, amending a current plan, or of course assisting you in settling an estate, and that happens wherever you are in the state of Michigan. If you were to go to the Doyle Law PC website, what are you going to find there? One of the services, our virtual office. Through the virtual office, you can actually, with existing clients, update your estate plans, schedule telephone consultation with us, order certain legal documents that you need to have amended or prepared for you. Or if you're a new client, take a look at our Planning from Home service, again available at doylawpc.com, where you are able to actually obtain your entire estate plan without the need to risk your health in meeting with us through our office. We'll have telephone consultation with them, or Zoom consultation with you, etc. Wherever you happen to be. Bottom line, wherever you happen to be in this great state of Michigan, I'm confident that we can work with you in putting together your estate plan, updating an estate plan, or helping you with settling a loved one's estate. And we're excited to announce that we now have available on the website our legal store. Perhaps you're needing a certificate of a trust because you're looking at selling real estate that's in a trust, or you just need a power of attorney. You can now, through the legal store, again at doylawpc.com, order individual legal documents that will be prepared by us and sent to you for execution. Well, in closing, of course, as always, if you have a comment about the program, a topic that you'd like to have me discuss, or questions that you would like to have answered, please send me an email, tom@tuesdaywithtom.com, or mail me a postcard, Tom Doyle, P.O. Box 16066, Lansing, Michigan 48901, and we invite you, and invite your friends and family. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. That would be Tuesday with Tom. Obviously, follow the office as well at Doyle Law PC. Remember, the program's now available on many channels out there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, etc. The Tuesday with Tom app is available in the App Store and on Google Play. And you can always ask your smart speaker to play Tuesday with Tom. Well, thank you again for spending some of your time with us on this Tuesday afternoon. As always, I hope that you have an awesome day and an awesome week in Michigan. Stay safe. Tuesday with Tom has been brought to you by the estate planning attorneys at Doyle Law PC. To learn how we can help you with your estate plan or with settling a loved one's estate, please call us today at 517-323-7366. That's 517-323-7366.